We're nearing the end of this session, and I just wanted to maybe finally, unless there's any other interventions, ask you to share with all my colleagues an interview I heard you take part in a couple of weeks ago on BBC World, when you were given 60 seconds to give your big idea for the world. We have a little more, in fact we have a lot more than 60 seconds, so don't feel restricted, but the 60-second big idea you gave, I think is something we'd all like to share in, and perhaps you could take as long as you want to explain.
No, it's a trick that it was myself and an American writer on women writers in the United States. She did a marvelous sort of study. Who's the third person? Right, and the rise and fall of communism. So 3 people with very different interests, and then their trick question is to say, in 60 seconds, what would you do if you were master or king or mistress or queen of the world? What would you do to make the world a better place? And she wanted me to say in advance what it would be so that she could prepare the others, and I refused. And then I thought up something, and it was actually a rather terrible thing, that everybody would have to be, for some hours, the person they most dreaded in the world. And it could be some great dictator, or it could be somebody who's abusing you, or someone kind of close. And really what I was trying to get at was to say, to imagine yourself into the place, the thinking, the existence, the worldview of the person, and I didn't want to say who frightens you the most, whom you most dread. You can even dread somebody you love. It can be very, very complicated. So Archie Brown couldn't make up his mind between Hitler and Stalin. He didn't quite get the point. The point was, how can we live on the same planet with people who just give us the total creeps, as a kind of an exercise in existential imagination? And if everybody could do that, get out of their own skins and into the skins of somebody else, I felt that could be emancipatory. But the minute I tried to do it myself, I found it a rather terrifying idea. I grew up as a kid with Hitler in the background. He was the demon. He represented everything terrible, the Nazi, but it wasn't just as a symbol. The story of the camps, the genocide came out, the bombing, the gratuitous, as well as the directed violence, the racism, and it was cataclysmic. And as a young kid growing up in that world, he became the principal enemy, the epitome of all social evil. And later on, when I was thinking about capital punishment, then I would test it. Could Hitler live and live on? And there was no doubt that immediately after World War II, the rage and the anger was so great, there was just no way that if he'd been caught, his life could have been spared. And yet I see it as a way of almost agonizing with myself, and sparing him that. And then it would be a very horrible thing, imagining myself in his shoes and trying to see the world from his point of view. I actually can't. I actually can't. But even trying to get there and thinking why I can't get there, it's maybe the limits of human capacity to empathize with another. But we have to stretch it as much as we possibly can. I don't know who you've been imagining, or who you would imagine yourself into, or who represents the greatest dread.
Can I just say something about that? Because I kind of slightly worry about that as an idea, because I think the victims of uses of power, certainly in terms of gender relations and violence, I think spend a lot of their time having to empathise and understand the perpetrator of the abuse. And I think the challenge is about how do you get people who misuse their powers to develop their sense of empathy. And I guess my worry about that is those of us who suffer through abuses of human rights, I think already have done too much on the empathy. And we need the other side to shift along a bit. So I'm not sure what I think about that as a big idea.
It's a very beautiful sentiment you're expressing, a very strong one. I think the great gift that victims give to the world is a capacity to transcend and to understand, and a superior set of moral beliefs and values. And to the extent that our Truth Commission enabled us in an institutionalized way to do that in South Africa, I think it was very liberating and very healing. I mean, I met the man who put the bomb in my car, and it shook me up quite a lot, but it humanized him, it humanized me, it was positive. And I think in a way it's what I call my soft vengeance. It's not doing to them what they did to us, but finding a way to justify to validate the beliefs that we stood by. But whenever I'm in trouble with an argument, I always resort to dialogue. And I say, well, the dialogue continues. And people do get away with it as it's called. But I think the other forms of accountability than simple punishment, locking people up, executing them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's got to be some sense of justice in that. That happens in various ways, but I guess for me, I think the issue about empathy needs to. I do think it's important for victims to actually show that empathy, and I think there aren't necessarily always enough spaces to do that. But I think there needs to be more openness on empathy the other way, and maybe part of why I did work in South Africa was because it was seen as the way for us.
we found in our country that when Mandela, instead of turning on the guards, spoke with a kind of acknowledgement of them as human beings, it had a huge impact in the country. And then it encouraged the guards to come forward and acknowledge the wrongs that they'd done. Whereas if you just denounce them, pointed a finger, they cringe and they retreat into self-defense and silence.
Well, how do we bring this to an end? I think, Albie, you're the inspirational living representative of human dignity and proportionality, and it's not just a South African brand, it's something that is universal, but you certainly epitomise it. And your 60 seconds idea reminded me of Edward Said and respect for the other, the same experience in the same context of where that came from. So we're indebted to you for the time that you've shared with us in coming to Scotland. So I'd like to thank you all, and if you could show your appreciation for the time we've had with Albie.